Hi, and welcome back to I Create for You. I'm doing another story in the Lighthouse Ghosts and Legends book by Nina Kostopoulos. And this is the lighthouse featured in this story. St.Simons Island Lighthouse in St.Simons Island, Georgia. Very tall one. Okay. Here we go. A keeper reclaims his post. St.Simons Island Lighthouse, St.Simons Island, Georgia. St.Simons Island Lighthouse towers over the entrance of St.Simons Sound, just east of Brunswick, Georgia. The original lighthouse was constructed in 1808 on the very site where the colonial Fort St. Simons once stood. Built under General James Oglethorpe to protect the southern portion of the island, the fort was destroyed in 1742 by retreating soldiers during the Battle of the Bloody Marsh. At the start of the 19th century, a plantation owner named John Cooper took possession of the land and named it Cooper's Point. Because Cooper supported the idea of a lighthouse, a few years later, in 1804, he sold it to the government for $1. It was to be the site of the island's first harbor light. The original St. Simons light was built of tabby, a building material composed of sand, lime, oyster shells, and water, which was taken from the remnants of nearby Fort Frederica. James Gould, the tower's chief architect, became its first keeper. President Madison appointed him to the post at a salary of $400 a year. He served for 27 years. In 1857, the island's harbor light was raised to the rank of coastal light, but just 5 short years later, the 75-foot tower was reduced to rubble. In 1862, in order to prevent federal troops from utilizing it, Confederate forces used black powder to level the lighthouse and keeper's dwelling. It took 10 years and many lives to rebuild. Finding and obtaining appropriate equipment was often difficult in post-Civil War America. It took weeks or even months to replenish needed supplies. But for the building crew of St. Simons Lighthouse, this was not the only setback. Stagnant ponds around the building site bred malaria. Several members of the construction crew, as well as the first contractor and the investor who replaced him, contracted the illness and died. On September 1st, 1872, the St. Simons Lighthouse was completed under the direction of another investor. It stood 104 feet above the water. A target for intense rains and wind, the new keeper's dwelling had been fortified with walls a foot thick. However, while these walls successfully kept the fierce storms that slam against the Georgia coast out, they were unable to quell storms brewing within. Originally, the St. Simons Lighthouse was built as a single-family residence, but it was later converted into 2 separate apartments. The lighthouse keeper and his family typically shared their home with an assistant and his family. It was an ideal solution to the problem of long hours and isolation. Yet in the case of keeper Fred Osborne and his assistant, this arrangement failed miserably. Osborne served as a keeper toward the end of the 19th century and was notoriously meticulous in his care. So much so, in fact, that when the position for assistant keeper became available, there were very few applications. One gentleman, John Stevens, felt he was up to the task. Sorry if I repeat myself, I had to pause for a second. One gentleman, John Stevens, felt he was up to the task. He was ultimately awarded the position and trained under Osborne's tutelage. Nevertheless, Osborne never trusted him with significant duties. In retrospect, it could be said that Fred Osborne was wise not to trust John Stevens. Unable to foster a friendship with the keeper, Stevens eventually found comfort and companionship in the keeper's wife. When Osborne found out he flew into a rage. He confronted Stevens, and the two had a bitter and bloody argument in the front lawn of the lighthouse. Osborne pulled a pistol, but Stevens, who was carrying a shotgun, fired first. Not wanting to face murder charges, Stevens rushed the dying Osborne to Brunswick Hospital. He told the nurses that Osborne had been shot by accident. Then, dutifully, he returned home to tend the unmanned lighthouse. Upon Osborne's death, the sheriff brought Stevens in for further questioning, but with no one else trained to tend the lighthouse, it was decided that he should return to his duties until his trial, or, if necessary, until an appropriate replacement could be found. Stevens ultimately claimed self-defense, and the charges were dropped. Prior to the murder of Fred Osborne, there had never been any indication of a ghost at the St.Simons Island light. I don't know if I'm saying it right, if it's Simons or Simmons, but I'm catching myself saying both. Ever since, keepers, locals, and visitors have reported unusual and unexplainable activity. From 1907 until 1936, Carl Svensson served as lighthouse keeper. When he and his family moved into the lighthouse, they had no prior knowledge of the lighthouse's haunted history. In the evenings, while preparing dinner, Mrs. Svensson would hear sounds of footsteps walking on the staircase. Assuming it was her husband coming down for dinner, she was particularly alarmed when she realized no one was there. She shared this news with her husband, who at first thought the lonely isolation of their lighthouse life had taken its toll on his wife, but eventually he too began to hear the footsteps. On one occasion, Mrs. Svensson began setting the table and heard what she thought was her husband coming down to eat. When the heavy sounds of the footsteps reached the bottom of the staircase, the kitchen door swung open and, instead of Carl, a cold wind slid through the room, frightening both Mrs. Svensson and the family dog. The dog's fur stood on end, and he began barking hysterically, as he too sensed the presence of an invisible force. The ghost never harmed the couple, and eventually they learned to live with its presence. Those involved with the lighthouse are hard-pressed to find a reasonable explanation. Current curator Deborah Thomas reports that people who visit the lighthouse alone at night sometimes hear things. Most feel that Osborne's spirit returned because of unfinished business. His subordinate, John Stevens, had taken his wife, his life, and in the end, his post. Revenge was in order. But why he continued to haunt the lighthouse even after Stevens' death is anyone's guess. Perhaps, as in life, he's loath to trust anyone else with its significant duties. To reach St. Simons or Simmons, it's probably Simons Island, take Interstate 95 to Highway 17, take Highway 17 to the toll road. Maps to the island and lighthouse are available at the toll booth. The lighthouse and Museum of Coastal History are open daily. For a nominal fee, visitors may climb the tower for a magnificent view of the island and browse through the Coastal Museum, which is located in the old keeper's quarters. And they give you more information on how to contact them. So, now I get to try to draw. I've already forgotten his name. Mr. No wait, that's the other guy. John Stevens had taken his... Okay, Mr. Osborne. That's the ghost. Or supposed ghost. So, it says that they would hear him coming down, the new curator's wife would hear him coming down the steps, just the footsteps. So I'm going to try to do a somewhat, not a total spiral staircase, because, I suck at anything that has to do with buildings or anything of that sort. Give me animals and gothic stuff, and I can do that. But so we'll see how this turns out. Sometimes I surprise myself. Okay, let's see. We will do a staircase. I'll zoom you guys in a bit. There we go. And I will make it come around. This is the railing. And it's harder to keep you guys in frame when you're zoomed in, so pardon me if I sometimes get engrossed in what I'm doing and not pay attention to where you guys are looking. Either way, in the end, you'll get to see what I've done, but maybe not so much of the process of getting there. You live and learn, right? Okay, so that's part of the staircase. And let's see, I'll try to do... I'm going to try to do like a ghostly image here. Even though they really didn't see him per se, I'm just going to do some kind of ghostly image because I can. No, because it makes more sense to me to draw something coming down the steps. Let's see if I can get this part. This is the face. There I am. And you know what? I always complain that I have not gotten my blending sticks out for me to use. And you guys just saw me use my hand, right? Well, let me show you how far away the blending sticks are. Yep, that far. Okay. Maybe it's the fact that I haven't gotten them out of the bag that makes me say, oh, nope, can't use them. Gotta use finger like I always do. Okay. Nice ghostly figure coming down the steps. Should have made it more man-like, but hey, what are you gonna do? Here we go. After all those years, he's probably just looking like a misty figure anyway, if he does ever get seen. It's amazing how long ghosts can stick around. I guess that's what happens. This is just my opinion. It happens when they're not at rest. Sometimes you hear people will say, I'm trying to do the steps now. Will say how they aren't at rest because they don't even realize they're dead. Yeah. I think when you start walking through walls and stuff, I think you should be getting an idea that there's something up, right? Like I said, just my opinion. Do another railing over here a little bit. I might have to erase this side, but we'll see what happens. I'll just bring this straight down. Like I said, this is going to be interesting because me and staircases and any kind of architecture is just too much of a challenge, I think, for me. So there's too much my opinion is too much to do with having things going a certain way, a certain angle. I'm just not good at that kind of thing. So get the railing in here. Like I said, this is just going to be the best I can do. Okay, so that's one step. He's coming down. Floating over him, basically. And I'll just make the stairway go up behind him a little bit. Get you in there so you can see what I'm doing. That's just going to be the stairway headed up behind him that he came down. Okay, now let's try to figure out how to do the rest of these steps. It's going to take some finessing here. Okay, this should go down. One way to get me quiet is to make me do steps. Not a good thing when you're trying to do a video, huh? Being quiet. I'm just trying to see if it looks half decent. If you wonder what's taking me so long to get from point A to point B here on some of these steps. Let's see. Let's try to take it over this way a little bit. Can't make that step look so small. I don't know what the step system looks like. I know it's possibly spiral because that is a very tall, for 140 feet, that is a very tall lighthouse. I'm noticing that in some of these stories, the lighthouses are 75 feet, so 140 is pretty tall. Which, you know, in my opinion, again, I think that if they're going to be signaling ships, they should be tall because they need that time frame to get their attention. Oh, good lordy, Lou, these steps are getting to me. Okay. And you know what? I think I shall end the steps there. Put a railing right here. And maybe, like I said, I will erase this so it doesn't look so bad. It just looks like the end of the stair. Look at me trying to get out of doing some more steps. Okay, and this here maybe shouldn't be so high up. Alrighty. And in reality, if that's that low, do it this way. Get rid of this. Sorry, folks, but I warned you. Okay. Not too bad, but still. Could have been better. Just gonna make that all itself. And there's the lighthouse. The lighthouse keeper, Mr. Osborne, no relation to Ozzy, has come down the steps. And supposedly he blows open the door. So we shall put a door here. so that when he comes down off the steps, there's a doorway there. I guess it's going into the kitchen where she has the food ready, and we'll do, it's blowing in. So how the heck will I do that? Oh boy, I'm stymied at this one. Trying to figure out how to do the door that you can see it getting blown in, but you wouldn't really see it unless I... Well, there you go. It's going into the room, the door, and then supposedly through a rush coming from him. Make a rush coming from him. That blows open the door. And startles her and the puppy dog. Alrighty. Let me zoom you out. And there you be. I'll bring it up a little bit. My attempt at the spiral staircase. The ominous Osborne coming down from the spiral. And you can see him rushing. This is supposed to be like that cold air that comes in and blows the door inward and then scares them. Alrighty then. I wonder if he still does that today. I mean, I'm not sure when these stories were actually written in this book. Let me just check the... This was copyrighted in 2003. I have no idea. I wonder if anybody has ever looked into what is the longest time a ghost has made itself known. Over how many years after the incident and at the beginning of its haunt. That'd be something to look into. That's a rabbit hole there, I believe. Alrighty. Well, I hope you liked the story and me fumbling through the whole thing and my interpretation, illustration of what they had felt and heard and had happen. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't, and share if you'd like to. Make a comment or two. Let me know what you think. If you have any stories you know of or any books you know of. I got this book from the library because when the Haunted Pets was over, I wanted something different other than the Ghost Stories of Berks County, Pennsylvania, which I'm still working on, and we might get to the one in there that has us going to Hawk Mountain, which isn't too far from us. But we'll see. We get rain. We got blasted with rain again today. It's, of course, right now the sun's shining, but it's like, you know, a waiting game some days. When you're waiting and waiting for the weather to be nice, and nope. And you have so much stuff you'd like to get done, but can't because now it's raining. That's how I was when I didn't have my dryer. Now I got a dryer, so I don't have to worry about that. But when I want to hang my clothes out, I couldn't hang them out because the rain came. Okay, enough yapping. I'll see you guys in the next one. Hopefully, bring your friends. We'll have a ghost party. See you later. Thanks for stopping by.